Hi everyone. Thank you and welcome again to program Jom Sembang Air or Let's Talk Water. This is our 9th discussion for a total of 9 panel discussions that we have prepared. So I'm very happy, very grateful that until today you are still with us since March. And this program has been brought together by Forum Air Malaysia, FOMCA and WICAM. If you want to know more about these three organizations, please go and check out their Facebook page, find out what are the activities they are doing, and check out their website. The program has been designed on the topic themed around water disruptions. It has 3 series. The first series, we talked about unbundling water disruption, and then we went back to basics, knowing what behind the scene scenarios when it comes to water services industry. And finally, the third series, we're talking about advocacy and awareness. Today, specifically, our grand finale, we're going to have a conversation on consumer responsibility. With that, we have 4 esteemed panelists. So I thank them very much for spending some time with us after their office hours, late in the evening. First and foremost, we have Engineer Muhammad Taufik from Indawater, professional engineer. He's the head of planning and engineering in IWK. His main areas of expertise are in the infrastructure developments and sewage and wastewater management. He has worked in several consulting firms before joining Indawater way back in 1996. So he's one of those pioneers in Indawater. So don't be deceived by his young boyish looks. He's pretty seasoned. And Engineer Taufik has also involved in development, not in the sewage industry infrastructure, not only in Malaysia, but also internationally. So he has wealth of experience. So we thank him very much, Engineer Taufik, for joining us today. And second one is Dr. Kali. Dr. Kali has appeared in our program before, and he has offered to come. He had offered his time again. We have invited him again for this program. He is a river care manager for Global Environment Center, who works on lake and river management, pollution control, environmental education program with more than 20 years of experience in river ecosystem. So he have done extensive work engaging with public and community, especially surrounding the river. So Dr. Kali's experience will be valuable for us to see what are the problems that actually we are facing when it comes to natural resources aspect. What are the consumers' issues in relation to natural resources? So we thank him. And he is a well-recognized key expert when it comes to resource and ecosystem management. Dr. Kali, thank you for joining us again. Next is Tuan Abdul Rashid. He's a CEO for Syarikat Air Melaka. Tuan Abdul Rashid, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you. Good evening.
Yes, and before he was a CEO, he's a CFO. So he is not only has the knowledge about the entire water service or water supply, treatment and supply company, the knowledge and the executive knowledge, but he also has the financial knowledge, especially the issues when it comes to tariff where consumers expect certain services, but the tariff is always that slippery slope. So we're glad that you have him on board. And one thing about Tuan Abdul Rashid, he has extensive experience in multiple corporate companies. So he do come from industry, private sector, so he do know their pain as well. So it'd be fantastic to have someone who knows the pain and now currently servicing that particular pain point, which a lot of commercial sector has when it comes to water industry. Last but not least is a dear friend of mine, Mr. Kiru from Suruhanjaya Perkhidmatan Air Negara. So this is the man that you're supposed to be fearful of because he is the enforcement head, and he's previously, before he joined SPAN, he was a practicing lawyer, and since 2008, he is a senior director. He's been in SPAN. He's a senior director for enforcement division of SPAN. So today we have a person who can tell when you are putting yourself in a position that you can get caught. So we are really glad having Kiru on board. So thank you, Kiru, for joining us today.
Thank you, Bonita, for having me. Thank you.
Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, so today we're going to talk about consumer responsibility, because consumers as polluters versus consumer as beneficiary is really a thin line between you are being responsible, causing the pollution, and you are also affected when pollution happens based on the quality of the services that you receive. So today we're going to have some conversation on what is the accountability level of consumers should have, where are the challenges, what are their duties, the citizen duty that they should play when it comes to water services industry. With that, I would like to start with Mr. Kiru from SPAN. So here, Mr. Kiru, one thing is, as I mentioned earlier, consumers as polluters to the same product that consumers are benefiting. So consumer do have their rights to get water and sewage services. And as consumer, we also have some obligation to ensure that services that we get meet certain standards. Please share with us what are the regulated provisions in the law that actually looks at consumer responsibility. We do know about the consumer rights, but now we want to know about what are the provisions in the law in relation to Water Services Industry Act that that actually regulate consumer responsibility.
Okay, thank you, Bonita. Hope you all can hear me, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Generally, when we look at consumers, generally consumers are always perceived as victims or aggrieved parties. Well, it's true in the common sense of the word. I mean, consumers are the end users of product and services rendered by industries. So basically, they are at the mercy of the industries, and when certain things are not provided according to their wishes, and they will be victimized, and they will be deprived of the benefits and rights. But for me, I think personally, I feel, and I think when it comes to the water industry, I believe consumers cannot be perceived as victims all the time, because I think they have some form of responsibility in that manner where they are also supposed to be the protector of the resources they use. So we are talking about the water industry today generally. So I would like to touch on the consumers pertaining to water industries. But when we look at consumers in the general perspective, of course, they are always going to be short-handed in services rendered by other parties to them. That yes, they always say consumer is right, consumer is always first. You know, those kind of mottos and phrases are thrown at consumers and also to the service providers. But I believe when it comes to water, consumers cannot be right all the time, I suppose. I think because when we say about water, one of the most essential items any person in this world needs, and I suppose they also should share and burden some of the responsibility to make sure that they use water in a wiser way and use the services in a proper way and not to abuse whatever they have received from the service providers. You know, so when we say responsibility on the part of consumer, and I think there are many laws which protects them, and there are also many laws which also obligates them to do the right thing. So one of the laws which we have here today is the Water Services Industry Act 2006, which came into force in 1st January 2008, and which has been enforced for the past 13 years. There are many provisions of the law where the consumer can, without knowing, I think most of the time when they breach the law, they always say that we didn't know that such a law exists. I mean, that's where we come in. So the moment we enforce it, that's the time they know that, or they have breached a certain provision, which they never thought that it is going to be against the law in the first place. So actually, if you ask me to highlight the specific provisions, there are many actually. When we look at the provisions of the law in VCI itself, in Act 655 itself, it covers everybody. That means it obligates everyone. It doesn't pick and choose who it applies to. So if you ask me for a specific provision, I wouldn't be able to give you specific provision. I would say all the non-compliance provisions will be applicable to every consumer in this country. So if ever they touch into any part of the provisions or they breach any part of the provision, they will be subjected to further action. So every consumer has got the obligation to fulfill the requirements under VCI. So when I talk about consumer, it includes domestic and also commercial. So it doesn't limit only to domestic users, because when we look at commercial users, they are also consumers in another form of looking at it. So yeah, so that is generally what I want to touch. So as we go along, I can be more specific as to which are the typical provisions which will apply to the common folks like us, and then we can discuss further on that.
Great. So we're going to come back to you on that, Mr. Kiru. So now that gives me an opportunity to ask Encik Rashid and also Encik Taufik, when as an operator, service provider, providing water supply services as well as sewage services, what are the challenges that you get due to irresponsible consumer behavior? So maybe Encik Rashid can start off, then Encik Taufik.
Okay, dua perkara segmen yang kita kena tengoklah bila melibatkan this bekalan air yang melibatkan tanggungjawab pengguna ni. Yang pertama, we're talking about the source lah. Source maksudnya raw water. Sumber air ni kita dapat daripada sungai, daripada dam dan juga mana-mana catchment yang disediakan oleh pihak negeri lah. Jadi masalah yang challenges kita adalah daripada sungai. Di mana sungai ni kita share dengan orang ramai. Jadi kalau kata sungai ni tak dijaga, jadi sumber air kita ni adalah dalam keadaan yang tidak mengikut, sometimes tak mengikut spesifikasi yang diperlukan dekat kita punya logi. So contohnya dengan pembuangan sampah, pembuangan sisa-sisa pepejal, melepaskan chemicals dan sebagainya. Jadi tanggungjawab ni sebenarnya bukannya terserah kepada operator logi sahaja. Masyarakat juga memainkan peranan juga untuk memastikan sungai ni dapat dijaga oleh semua orang. Sebab airnya akan kita ambil, kita proses. Dan untuk kita proses di loji-loji, kita perlu ada parameters yang ditetapkan untuk membenarkan kita untuk memproses air tersebut. Kalau airnya berasid dan tak mencapai parameters yang ditetapkan, kita pun tak boleh proses. Ini yang jadi challenges kita. Jadi kadang-kadang kita kalau berlaku hujan yang kuat dan dia kekeruan yang terlalu tinggi sampai reading setinggi NTU langsung tak boleh baca. Jadi yang menyebabkan kita tak boleh nak proses air tersebut dan memerlukan chemicals yang tinggi kandungannya untuk kita proses. Sebab untuk pengetahuan semua, air ini berterusan diguna. Jadi kita tak boleh stop dan bila keadaan airnya stable, raw waternya cantik, baru kita proses. No, we can't do that. You see? So we have to make sure that raw water tu dalam keadaan yang terbaik so that kita boleh proses dan supply kepada pengguna. Yang kedua, ramai pengguna yang berpendapat berkata hari-hari hujan kenapa tak ada air. Ini satu perkara yang biasa kita dengar. That's why kita kena fahamkan kepada consumer yang iaitu raw water, tak semua raw water kita boleh proses. Ada banyak sungai-sungai di dalam Malaysia ni yang dia jadi airnya sudah tak boleh digunakan langsung, tak boleh diproses pun untuk di-convert become air bersih. Ini satu isu yang perlu kita pihak pengguna perlu tahu lah. Yang kedua, di peringkat pengguna bila bekalan air bersih. Jadi kita sebagai water operator sebarang permohonan untuk bekalan air, dan definitely kita ada syarat-syarat dan perlu dipatuhi. Dan bila dibekalkan air, dan especially dalam rumah, kita mensyaratkan pengguna perlu ada tangki air untuk sebagai storage. Tapi bila bekalan air telah diterima, pengguna sometimes buat sebarang renovation, ubah suai dan sebagainya, dan ada sebagainya tak maintain tangki air tersebut, melibatkan rosak, bocor ataupun kotor dan sebagainya, dan they always bypass the system. Jadi masalahnya bila berlaku dari masa ke semasa pipe pecah dan dia tak punya kolam tapungan, jadi dia selalu telefon kepada water operator dan menyalahkan kita kenapa tiada bekalan air dan kenapa lama. Biasanya bila penyelenggaran ataupun pipe pecah ni kita perlukan at least few hours, especially kalau melibatkan pipe-pipe besar lah. Tapi sebabkan pengguna gagal menyediakan tangki air yang sempurna dan dia bypass the system, direct supply from kita, our pipes, dan menyebabkan bekalan air mereka terputus. Dan yang ketiganya, kadang-kadang pengguna bila dia pergi ke tiada di rumah, dan sebenarnya dekat meter stand tu ada stopcock, dan jarang pengguna dia tutup air di stopcock. Kadang-kadang dia ada mungkin seminggu di luar, dan bila pressure kuat dan dalam rumah pipe ni pecah, jadi berlaku kebocoran dan berlaku pembaziran air. Ini perkara-perkara yang sepatutnya pengguna kena alert lah, kena pastikan sebelum keluar rumah, mungkin berhari tidak ada di rumah, dan perlu tutup stopcock tu so that mengelakkan berlakunya sebarang pembaziran air berlakunya pipe pecah di dalam kawasan rumah.
So I mean, that is, I mean, I like the way you explain from the resource dan masuk kepada bekalan within the premise. So it's really giving a snapshot of the whole challenges that you face. Tapi kebanyakan masalah yang kita dengar is when we most of the time bila kita cakap pasal gangguan air atau kualiti air, kita juga tahu mengenai pipe yang pecah and all those things. So maybe we can share a little bit about orang yang menyebabkan this gangguan, yang menyebabkan pipe pecah. We are not talking about natural aging process, but I'm looking more into kontraktor jalan atau orang yang lay electric cable, telecommunication cable. Those are also very frequent masalah yang memang berlaku almost every other day akibat daripada tindak tanduk of activity yang tidak berkaitan dengan air langsung. So maybe if you can share a little bit on that.
Okay, perkara ni memang berlaku sebab kebanyakan infrastruktur air ni menggunakan jalan-jalan JKR, reserve JKR, reserve PBT dan sebagainya. Dan di situ juga terlibat dengan utilities lain seperti telekom, TMB dan sebagainya. Jadi itu juga satu isu lah yang perlu kita ada coordination di peringkat negeri. Sebarang projek yang dilaksanakan mesti mendapat kerjasama ataupun dimaklumkan kepada water operator. Jadi kita boleh advise them daripada awal dan kita boleh tunjukkan jajaran kita apa pipe-nya, kedalamannya, so that dia lebih take notes lah sebelum tindakan dibuat sebarang perubahan dekat situ. Jadi bila berlaku pipe pecah dan pengguna definitely akan put the blame to syarikat air dan kita cuma boleh keluar notis. Jadi perkara-perkara ini juga yang menjadi satu faktor yang menyumbang kepada kekerapan gangguan bekalan air kepada pengguna lah. Tapi again, masa saya beritahu tadi, kita dah syaratkan melalui syarat yang ditetapkan oleh SPAN bagi pengguna air domestik dan juga pengguna air industri, especially industri, dia kena ada 2-day storage. So any breakdowns on the pipe utama di luar, jadi dia mampu untuk meneruskan aktiviti mereka di dalam sebab ada di internal storage. Tapi kebanyakan pengguna, macam saya ulang lagi sekali, baik pengguna domestik ataupun pengguna komersial, dan dia bypass the system atau dia don't have enough storage. Dan sometimes dia buat expansions of the punya water demand dalam aktiviti mereka, tapi dia tak memaklumkan kepada water operator. Dan jadi storage dia tak cukup. Itu pun satu juga yang menyebabkan gangguan bekalan air kepada pengguna.
Okay. So now I would like to hear from Indah Water, because kalau masalah operator air macam beban dia macam gunung, saya rasa kalau Indah Water beban dia macam satu banjaran lah ya, Engineer Taufik. So really like to hear the challenges when come to irresponsible consumer behavior that causes you problem to provide consumer services.
Yeah, terima kasih Puan Bonita. So I'm talking about the challenges in sewerage sector actually. So then due to irresponsible daripada consumer yang tak bertanggungjawab actually. So of course I think there are a lot of challenges that we are facing lah due to this call it irresponsible consumer behavior. So which I can say, I think one of the reason the challenge will lead to the failure of the system, and also if the system failure, then you have the environmental pollution to the end, and I think as operator also, these challenges also will lead to the unnecessary high OPEX cost to the operator, because we need to act and to take whatever action. So then sad to say, some consumer, they think that they can throw anything to the sewerage system actually. It's something like a big dustbin actually. You just throw anything, and because it's treating dirty thing, so then they think that no cost to treat the waste actually. So this is I think a very wrong perception actually. So we need to address this actually. So I think glad that you have this forum. I think this is a right forum we can discuss on the responsibility lah. So then I think we know that the sewerage system in Malaysia designed to treat domestic waste only actually. So it's not going to treat whatever solid waste, so toxic waste. So the domestic waste means that those waste coming from the house activities. So from your bathroom, from your kitchen actually. So then due to the washing and cleaning activities. So this is considered as a common type of the domestic waste. And some consumer actually, they are throwing something like diapers to the toilet bowl. And also the leftover curry, kepala ikan, just put it in the sink, then it going through the sewer pipe actually. So this is where the problem may happen actually, because of the pipe can get clogged. And when the pipes get clogged, the sewage flow is obstructed. So then the sewage will overflow to the ground, to the road, and it become very unhygiene actually. So if water overflow, people will happy actually, can take shower. But for sewage, I think nobody dare to come near lah actually. So because it's a dirty thing. So this is then the bad thing is some houses nearby to the blockage area, they cannot flush the toilet actually. They cannot go to the toilet. So then there will be a lot of complaint received actually. So because of consumer, one, there is a problem occur at their premise, they want us to resolve it immediately actually. So they cannot wait actually. So they cannot wait to pay the bill, but they cannot wait for us to come to resolve the problem actually. So this is challenges for us. So this is a common thing because of I think over the years I working with water. So if you can look into our sewage system, there's so many things that people just throw to the sewer pipe. For example, they can get things like you can get wood, you can get call it the bicycle frame, and you can get, sometimes it's good, you can get the TV set also in the sewer pipe actually. So this is the thing that can easily can lead to the pipe clogging actually. So while for the STP or the sewage treatment plant actually, it was designed to design using biological treatment actually. So means we heavily rely on the microbe or bacteria to do the work actually. So for example that the sewage is the food for the microbe lah. So as a layman term lah. So if someone throws something like the hazardous waste or chemical waste to the system, which is non-domestic waste, what will happen? Of course, the microbe that our soldier to do the treatment, they will get upset. And if the excessive concentration of the toxic waste, they may die actually, die off, because of they cannot sustain the heavy load from the waste. It's something like us also. We have to take it very at our level actually. Too much, then it really become worse to us lah. So that's the thing, that when the microbe will be die off, so then the problem is there's no treatment at the plant actually. So then you know that to maintain the billion of microbe in the biological tank is not easy actually. So once they upset, so if one is dead, for example, then it will take few hours or few days for the microbe to reproduce and to come back in order for the microbe to do the treatment as usual actually. So this is something that that we need to prevent this, or else then means that you cannot get the treatment, you cannot get the effluent discharge as comply to the Department of Environment standard. So then when this happen actually, so the thing that we need to look for the alternative treatment. So that sometimes we need to contain the sewage in the process tank. Try not to let it go, because of once it will leave the treatment plant, it will go to the water course and will pollute the river actually. So this is a thing that's I think the main challenges that I can share actually. So this is the thing that means the consumer must know actually. So what's the impact if they are not become a good citizen, just throwing everything to the sewage system? This will happen to the sewage system. So I think that was, I think, a few cases that I want to share. Few challenges that we facing due to the irresponsible of the consumer behavior.
Okay, thank you, Engineer Taufik. So, Kiro, you have heard Rashid and Taufik was sharing a list of challenges, even though it is at a broader scale, not targeting specifically whether it is a sector or individual consumers. I know you're from enforcement division. That means you actually wait, not to say wait, I mean, when people fail or they break the law, then you actually have, if you have provisions, you take action on them. So, but most of these issues that has been mentioned, for example, like when contractors doing work in public roads, some damages happen. How likely you can actually take action, like what Engineer Taufik was telling about people discharging, individuals can be discharging probably like God knows what into the system and affecting the entire sewer line and treatment plant. But how is it possible for you to take enforcement action if you don't catch these people in action, if you get what I mean?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's the right time for me to explain as to the requirements under the law, like what Encik Rashid and Encik Taufik raised just now, the issues. So I have narrowed down to 3 issues here. The first one is when it comes to the pollution part. Now, a lot of people don't realize that river is the main source of our water supply. So river and the river water is the main resources where we take for the purpose of treatment and also supplying to the consumers. Sad to say, in our country, river is treated as the biggest dumping ground they can ever get. So anything and everything goes into the river. So I think that is something which is probably lack of awareness, lack of exposure to people as to that being the main source. So this has to be probably emphasized further. Now, when we talk about pollution to the river, it is an offense under our law. Now, as what Ms. Punitha has highlighted, the biggest challenge we have is to nab the culprit who is committing these crimes. Now, there are situations and circumstances where we can identify the potential suspects. So we know and we can apprehend and also do the necessary course of action against them. But there are circumstances where things happen without realizing and without knowing who is the main culprit who has contributed to the pollution into the resources. Now, these are the challenges we face. Actually, for the last 2-3 years, we have been bogged down with this pollution issue quite rampantly. And I think because of that, we had major disruptions in the state of Selangor and KL. So it has been quite challenging for us. So what has happened for the last 2 years, there has been a very a major and serious collaboration with other agencies, especially when we had PDRM and also JAS on board with us. We could see that we have successfully, what I could say, take action against some of the suspects. And they have been also formally charged in court for the offenses they have committed. And we hope and we believe that this should be a good exposure for the rest of the members of the public that it is a serious offense for them to pollute the river. We hope it can be a deterrent to the others also. But of course, we cannot rule out that these crimes will not continue. Now, when you talk about criminal activities, we had the most deterrent sentence, like for example, death sentence for murder and drug trafficking. But we still have people committing murder and trafficking drugs. So even that is not a deterrent. So for a criminal, any opportunity which arises is an opportunity for them to do something wrong. I mean, if their mindset is about trying their luck, if they get caught, it's unfortunate. If they don't get caught, they are very fortunate. So that is the perception, or that's how the criminal mind perceives most of the acts which they commit. So it is an offense under our law, and it's also an offense under the penal code and also under the other legislation, for example, the Environmental Act. And so we have successfully, together with the other agencies, have taken action against polluters. And of course, currently what our concept is, it's more towards preventive. So what we thought is being reactive is too late for us actually, most of the time, because the damage is done. And you let people suffer for 5 days without water. I mean, that's bad. So the approach has been more towards preventive. So there has to be constant monitoring, constant patrolling into hotspots and areas which we potentially see that could be the major source of polluting the resources. Okay, so touching on pollution, yes, there is a provision which obligates people not to pollute the resources, right? The second issue touched by Encik Rashid just now was on the third-party damage. Contractors negligently causing damage to pipelines, which most of the time runs underground. And of course, it is done without taking the necessary precautionary measures. Our law obligates that there must be necessary precautions taken before they embark on carrying out activities on the ground, especially when the contractors want to lay down cables or wiring or whatever not underground. They have to engage with the respective utility providers, especially the water services and also the sewerage providers, to find out, to get a mapping of the pipe system which runs underground. Now, most of the time, if you look at, based on our experience in our course of investigation, they never do that. So the precautionary measures are not taken. So when you don't take the precautionary steps, you become negligent. Now, if you have taken the reasonable precautionary measures, I would say 80% of the time, this thing would not happen. So the operators will be protected with their utilities, I mean, their so-called assets are taken care of and protected, and there will be no disruption to water supply to the public. But most of the time, when they don't do the necessary precaution, they don't engage water operators with regards to the requirement under the law, they become negligent and they create this damage to happen, and it becomes an offense under the law. So that is another obligation on the part of contractors, that to ensure that before carrying out any work, they have to actively engage the operators to find out whether there's any pipeline parallel to the work they're going to carry out on the ground. The third issue, which was raised by Encik Taufik with regards to disruption to sewerage system. Now, this is also quite rampantly happening. People very blatantly open manholes. Of course, it is accessible, and that manhole is only catered for certain purposes. It is also not to be treated as another dumping ground for people to come and dump anything they like. Now, this also happens. So we have people who take chances to go to the remotest of places and remotest of areas to find this kind of manholes and dump toxic waste, other kind of substances other than sewage. Now, whatever is dumped into the manhole, it should be only sewage which can be catered by the sewage system. So if anything else goes into the system, it causes disruption to the system, and the system cannot function to the maximum capacity. It brings about disruption, it brings about pollution indirectly. Because the moment the treatment plant cannot produce the parameters which has been prescribed to them, what they release into the environment, it's pollution, because it is not allowable. Now, this is also provided under our law, where anyone who is caught polluting in this manner can be subjected to further action under VCR. So these are the three areas so far which I have heard from the operators, and yes, there are laws under our law which governs and regulates these acts. So consumers should be well aware. And I think lately, with the aggressive actions taken against some culprits, have made some kind of sensible awareness, especially to industry players. I'm talking about, this covers most of the industry players. We're talking about when domestic users are not to say, I mean, they are also culprit in certain ways, but they are not the major contributor to the pollution issue here. So we are looking at industry players who actually has got more to benefit when they do these kind of things. So the target from us is towards them. So I think also the awareness by way of publicity in the press and also in the media, and I think people are more aware, I suppose, in regards to these acts.
Okay. I like to raise this question to Dr. Kali, because you have had extensive experience in dealing with communities, right? Because from what Mr. Kiru have summed up, he is looking at the criminality, negligence, and illegal actions that has been done by people who are also consumers that causing certain action. But these particular actions can only come upon the act happens, and that is not what service provider wants, because that is already going to damage their reputation, their image, as well as their ability to provide services. But I'm trying to think from an angle where, okay, forgetting about criminality, because probably they have evil hearts, then we have to check their childhood, what happened. But in the other part of it, negligence and illegal actions, is it due to ignorance? Does community know? For example, just now Encik Rashid said minimum household should have 2 days of water storage. How many people know that there are laws? Of course, lawyers will say ignorance of the law is not an excuse or something like that. But the thing is, what are the outreach for a community? Are they aware what they can do, cannot do, and are they aware how their actions is causing problems?
Okay, thank you. I think now only I realize I was sandwiched by 2 operators and the regulator, I'm the only one coming from the NGO and hopefully talk about the consumer and so on. They are right. Obviously, as all we mentioned, I think this is not something new. I mean, everyone aware, and all the time people talking about responsibility of the consumer. I like to throw a few questions now, okay, as part of the overall what you call holistic way of looking into issue that we discussed this evening. When we say responsible consumer, who are the consumer? So we cannot address consumer is someone outside there just using the water. Even food operators, water operators, sewage operators, they are the consumer. Regulator operators, whatever, all are the consumer. Okay, so industrial is a consumer. Maybe during in the factory, they might maybe come under the industrial rate, but when they go back, they are consumer. Okay, whether consumer know their right, whether they're aware of this, is the answer is to some extent yes, they do. They know water is a basic need of human. They have all the right to access to the clean, safe water as a Malaysian citizen. And third one, to some extent, they also do understand the value of water. They do, because everyone knows water is life. River is a lifeline. Everyone knows that. But the question is, what's the price that people are willing to pay for that value? Do they get that value before we decide what's the price? So that is the questions. See, when you look into the consumer, they are right. When we have to see, they are looking into one, quality of the water. Second, quantity, whether I can get water all the time, okay, without any disruption and so on, okay. So these are the issues that when we talk about the consumer, whether they can be responsible consumer or responsible citizen. And secondly, whether we, okay, when I say we, the operators or even regulator or all the agencies, we play our part or not to make sure that public aware what should be their responsibility. We cannot blame the community for not playing their responsibility. My first question, do we play our part to make sure people do realize, as we know, I think rightly pointed out by Mr. Rashid and also Mr. Kiru, that 82% of our water come from the river. Okay, only 16% water, raw water come from the dam. But how many people knows about that? People are still thinking that their drinking water come from the dam. So why should I care for the river? People are disconnected from the nature, from the river. So whose fault is this? Is it our education system? Or is it the regulator or the operator that didn't translate this latest current scenario, how we are interconnected, how we are interrelated within one and others. Okay, so we are part, as I showed in the first talk, that we are part of the water cycle. This is what we fail to do, okay, that we fail to show to the public that we are the water cycle. We are playing important part of the water cycle. Okay, so therefore we need to show, because we cannot expect people to act, because if you see how people to act, you want people to care for the river, but study shows people only care when they see the value into it. Okay, when they see value, then only they care. So we have to ensure, we know people know the importance of water, but do they know the importance of the river? Okay, that is the big question mark. Okay, whose responsibility? Is it NGO? Is it agencies? Or is it ministry? Or even the food water operator? That's number one. Number two, people say, I mean, basically as a consumer, we say that, as even I always mention, the biggest issue for the operators is obviously the tariff. Okay, we always blame. In fact, I also agree that one of the reasons why don't motivate people to be responsible water consumer, water user is basically, beside other point, there are so many points, is one of the water tariff, the rate. Okay, relatively, one of the cheapest, yeah, around this region. okay, in Asia, all these things. But I like to also question that although in GC we are supportive to increase the water tariff, definitely is too low. But nevertheless, because when I spoke to public, when I communicate with the public throughout the country, one of the issues or lesson I learned, okay, from the public is why should we pay higher for the cost that generated by the polluter? As earlier, I think Mr. Kiru have mentioned that it's not so much about the domestic consumer cause the real problem for disruption, is industrial. So why should I pay my money to rectify the problem or the cost incurred to treat the water in the water treatment because of this industry and other player, that other culprit? So that is another aspect that we need to really look before we point our direction towards the consumer. Definitely, as I said, that we need to revisit our water tariff, all these things. But nevertheless, we also have to see whether we already empower them, okay, empower them with the right information, okay, empower them with the right skill, okay, to put them in a position to make a what you call informed decision, okay, to be responsible consumer, so that they play not only about wastage of water, okay, how to reduce the pressure on water resources, and so many other factors. Okay.
Okay, but Dr. Kali, see, probably Mr. Kiru, Encik Rashid, and Encik Taufik can also respond what Dr. Kali have said. But I would like to bring to surface, when we have conversation related to tariff, to say that one segment of the consumers are actually polluting more, so they have to pay more. But the fact is, people are paying based on the consumption, right? Everyone is getting similar quality, because I think everyone, the water operator, is giving the same quality, and they are paying based on the consumption. And we do know industries and commercial pay higher than domestic. That will be an interesting conversation to have. But I want to bring back into the conversation of consumer responsibility. As a responsible consumer, I shouldn't use more than certain volume of water. But does public know? I'm not talking about people in the sector who, like, all of us are player in the sector, so we are well aware. But let's say if we ask our neighbor who probably not from this sector, do they know how much water and beyond is considered overconsumption? Number one. Does people know that you shouldn't throw food waste and oil, your cooking oil, into the sink? So are those kind of information being disseminated regularly? And are we holding, for instance, one key thing that we always have problem in sewage treatment plant, which I know of, is wet wipes and toilet tissues, right? So does the manufacturer of wet wipes and toilet tissues are held responsible to put labeling on their product, to educate their users, wet wipes and toilet tissue users, that upon using these, you're not supposed to dispose? Are those kind of initiatives are being done, or should it be done? Because I do understand an angle of coming up for laws and regulations to say that if you don't do this, this will happen to you. But then telling them what you should do then, because I think that part seems to be missing. Especially when Encik Rashid said, honestly, just now Encik Rashid said 2 days water storage, I didn't know. I do have 5 days water storage because Kiasu element, but I didn't know 2 days was a minimum requirement, and I've been in this sector for 20 over years. So how much of this information is being, like for example, I'm holding my water bill here. There's no information telling me anything other than pelbagai cara mudah untuk membayar bill. That's the only information I have. There's no other information telling me how can I be a better water user or better sewage customer. I do not have that information. If all of you can give a comment on this.
Okay, I want to respond that. First thing about the okay, do people know how much water they're supposed to use? Obviously, statistics shows that we are overusing water. I mean, WHO said 165 liter per capita per day, where Malaysia boleh is 2 to 6 liter per day per capita. So that's above. and we tend to waste water, obviously that, but do people tell, aware that how much actual water to be consumed? The answer is, obviously there are so many parties are doing a lot of campaign from time to time, but unfortunately I would say that there's no proper structure education program yet in place. Okay, I mean, GC have doing this education program. In fact, we have Dr. H2O program. For information, we have done for 30 schools together with the SPAN. Okay, we did 3 years program with the SPAN, was a secretariat for the project and so on. It involves 7 states. We managed to reduce the statistic, reduce this 20 liters per day for the student. We did also another project, because to see whether people willing to change the behavioral changes. We also educate public about this water timber, water saving gadget. Study shows that, you know, when they install the water timber, due to the constant advice and also campaign, it actually reduced the water usage by 19 liters per day. Okay, this based on 760 households in PJ area. Okay, so I mean, there is a lot of campaign being carried out either by NGO or even agencies and so many parties there. But for me, whether this campaign managed to convince the public what role they should play on day to day, that is the question mark. Okay, a lot of people see campaign as a campaign, remain as a campaign. Okay, is it part of my daily life, daily behavior changes? That is the main issue. I still say, although there are some people who are converted and really into it, but majority of people still think that, you know, it's not my full responsibility to ensure to play a proactive role, because I treat this as a product by the supplier, in this case service provider. So all these things. And secondly, whether they know to dispose. Yes, they know. We've been exposed even from the school now about recycling, even currently upcycling, all these things. Yeah, don't throw rubbish, all these things. But whether our campaign or education program that managed to convince the people from whatever goes, because all the campaign goes to here now, never come down to your heart. That's why we need hard approach, not the structure or hard or soft approach. You need to bring things from here to here, because once it goes into their heart, people will change. And that is the gap I think still exists. And that's where every players, whether agencies or even ministry, and also the industrial player, have to play their part to make sure that it goes into like a Japanese, everything is in their heart. So that's why wherever they go, they do. Whereas here, we are still waiting for that transformation process.
I think I do
I'd like to
agree.
hear from, please.
I do agree with Dr. Khalil actually, because I think the awareness need to be done continuously So we cannot say that seasonal. So you want do it one big, then you stop, then you keep quiet, then you come back. I think it's no point So in fact, I think for RBK, I think we have done, I think of course since 1994, I think the various of the program has been done, even though we also collaborate with Dr. Kali as some of the few project, awareness project. So this, I think we already clearly specify that what is the customer do and don't really when they are dealing with the services. Remember that you can see that the cigarette box, even though they say that if you smoke, then you get all this cancer, who cares actually? They still buying actually. You sell 40 ringgit also they buy actually. So that's the thing But that one may be just a minority But our focus is more on the majority of those which we can still get then buy in from them, and we can influence them actually. So actually, I think one of the activities that I think we have done is, of course, now during the pandemic time is we are using a lot of the social media actually. So then like the digital and social media is very popular now. So in with the current trend, I think those they have easy access to it. I think it's quite effective. Then I think before the pandemic, normally that we try to reach the consumer personally actually. So what happened is normally we know that, for example, certain area there is a lot of local cases and in this area. So what we did is we will try to put up something like the exhibition booth, and a campaign at that particular area, strategic location. Maybe we choose one mall or one public area, then we try to do the soft approach to the consumer. So that's one of the reasons. So last time also, I think the most important is you must go to the ground. For example, the student, the primary school. So this is the one that we can be the future generation. So they are very smart actually. So I think if we can penetrate this young generation, of course, in future, we know that we have someone that can protect the environment. They know actually what is the right of the consumer. So what they cannot do actually. So this is, I think, very important lah. So this is the thing that I think we as I think UK, we try to expose as much as possible to the consumer. So that, in fact, I think we have done the open day. We call them to come to our plant. At least they know that they can see personally what's happening at the civil treatment plant. Actually, how difficult is the work actually. This is a so-called as a dirty, difficult, and dangerous work actually. So then with that they appreciate. That's why I think based on this sort of program, we can see that there is awareness level is can see that increase over the years largely. So this is I think what we have done. We feel this as mentioned earlier that cannot be the one-off program, must be the continuity of the program actually. So we must get the very good target group for us to make sure that it is effective.
Okay, I would like to add also on the colleagues' comments just now. Yes, it's very important to have this education and awareness programs. So normally, previously, what our practice is that we give a general campaigns. So what SMB takes the approach since last year is that we identify the community, the water supply come from which treatment plant, from which source. So we bring all these ketua-ketua communities, the NGOs, the BLIA. We have few programs. We run about 5-6 programs. We bring them to our treatment plant, then we show it to them where the source come from, then send the treated water to the communities. You see, so how we process is how the raw water quality is like, the chemical that we use, then we tell them how much the content of chemical that we have to use in order to treat the water. So make them really understand. Then they realize, oh, teruk air ni. So then some of the people that we bring in give the briefing. Then they said, are you sure you can the cost that you are producing, you sell this price, can cover the cost or not? See, because they feel it. Normally, previously we send it behind the bills, we just a campaign, jimat air, those kind of things, very general. So we have to go to the community, bring them to the place that we process the water, where we got the source, then become a quality water. You see? So from there, I believe we hope that with this initiative of campaigns, these people go back to the community and tell their peoples about the importance of to take care of our river. First. Second things, for information, Melaka, as everybody knows, is a water stress state. We don't have a natural catchment. Our river also very small if you compare to other states. Kalau di Perak tu Melaka ni panggil parit je, dia tak panggil sungai pun. You see? So then we have to pump the water from time to time. We have to send to the dams. So we feel that Melaka, we have to take a proactive approach. We set up this Melaka, what they call Majlis Air Negeri Melaka since last year. Because kita nak secara holistic. Because previously, the way we do things, decentralized. PBT dengan cara dia, what they call operator air dengan cara kita. Then pejabat tanah, kelulusan, whatever, pembangunan, dan secara decentralized. So with Majlis Air Negara, we put water is a priority to the state. So any development, anything that we want to do, we have to discuss with regards of the importance of water in Melaka. This is what we are doing. You see? So by having this, so we have holistic discussions with all the agencies to make sure that we have to protect our source. So we have to redesign the zoning of any developments, agriculture, manufacturing to a certain area. We cannot do a scattered development anymore, especially at the upstream area where our catchment was there. Then recently we already make sure that our dam sasaran penting, kita tak allow any intruders to go in. We take out all these people yang do agriculture inside our this sasaran penting in our dam area. We take out these people out from our dams. You see. Then PBTs, we have to make sure that they enforce. We have to make sure all the developers to comply on certain standard of their discharge water to the public rate. And the fourth things, the developers, they have to make sure they comply with kind of things. So I think with this approach, then make the peoples understand, like Dr. Kali said, some what the constituents say, I'm not the polluter. You say you should take care, you should address those polluters. Who are the polluters? We are actually. See, so as a government, then responsible government, we have to make sure, regards to water, we have to address secara holistic. Then we good, not more decentralized. Then we have to should continue the programs to the community. Then they know, oh, I get the treated water from this treatment plant, the source from the river. So I have to protect this river. You see? So they have to tell to their communities there, look, we get the water from this river. We have to work together to make sure there's no pollution happen in this river. You see? So this is what we been doing for the past 1 year. Because this PKP, we have to stop a while, but this is a very effective. Then we hope we can continue. Yes.
Actually, what the program you are doing is a dream come true for Dr. Kali, because he has been talking about needing to bring back people to the river, because there is a disengagement. Like it or not, we are disengaged from the nature. So that is actually, your program is actually a dream come true for Dr. Kali. So probably like we can hear from Kiru, because I know SPAN is doing a lot of programs to engage through social media, various platforms. Would like to know whether it's working, if it's working, how effective it is. But before we get to your response, Mr. Kiru, I would like to ask the organizer to put up a poll to all the listeners who are also consumers. How responsible, what kind of consumer are you? Number 1, very responsible. Number 2, not responsible. Number 3, lot of space to improve. So if the organizers can put up a poll, appreciate that. So Mr. Kiru.
Yeah. Okay. Touching on that same topic now, about awareness and exposure to to the public as to the importance of water. Now we can't say over the years. I think many years campaigns and awareness has been going on. Now I've been hearing this Jimat Air since my school days. So we can't say that these things have not been going on. I mean, we can't deny this. So to say that the lack of campaign, lack of awareness, I don't think so. There has been many, and it is still continuing. But what is lacking is, I think there is no value attached to the water we supply. So I believe awareness and campaign has to coincide with a proper value. So when there is a lack of value, regardless of how much of awareness and campaign you do, people are still not going to be accountable for the water they use. They are still going to abuse it. They're still going to waste it because they don't feel the pinch. Now let's take an example, electricity. At one point, we were not paying a premium price for electricity. Now, when there is a sudden spike in the electricity tariff, everybody is running helter-skelter to get how to conserve electricity, because the bills spiked and people were looking for methods to save energy. And this has happened for the last 5 or 6 years. People were looking for energy conservant products because, you know why? I don't want to pay a higher bill. Now that is not happening for water industry. So I think we can go on for the next 20 years and create awareness and campaigning. We'll be still talking the same issue today as we are talking today, 20 years time, that people are still not respecting and valuing the water they are using, unless we attach a value to it. So we are not talking about attaching a premium value, but there must be a reasonable value attached to it, which for me personally, I think we are not paying a good price for the water we are using today. So I mean, that's the call of another thing altogether. I think, of course, not one sole entity can make the decision. There has to be a collaborative and collusion thing about many people have to sit down and discuss and deliberate and come up with a proper solution to that. But as I said, maybe like what Cik Taufik has highlighted, we should target the school children. Now, hopefully, at least starting with them, for the next 10 or 15 years, we can see some improvement. Now, with the current generation, I'm very sorry. I don't think we can impart or input anything into them anymore. You know, let's be realistic. I mean, let's be realistic. I think it's quite difficult. You know, honestly, quite difficult. Campaign awareness is going on. I mean, it's not to say there's lack of campaign awareness. NGOs are doing it. Water operators are doing it. Regulators are doing it. Ministries are doing it. So what more can we do? As I said, I've been hearing Jimat Air since my school days. So that's a long, long time actually. I'm not trying to say that I'm old, but that's a long, long time. You know, so it has been going on for many years. So for me, I think to put accountability on the consumers, there must be a proper value attached to what they are using. And then I think we can see the sudden change of, the results can change overnight. I suppose we can see a better so-called usage of the water we supply them.
Yalah, kira tu cheap lah, kira RM2, RM8 per month.
Sorry? Yeah, exactly. I mean, the sewerage charges is how much? RM8 a month.
RM8 for the RM2 for low cost.
Even that people don't pay you, right? I mean, there's so many unpaid,
yeah.
you know. So can you imagine? So you see, it's so low, and still people can be responsible not paying it. So as I said, water and sewerage. I mean, the charges are. I mean, it's quite sensitive to highlight these issues here, but I believe probably it's about time to look at it seriously, I suppose.
I think I like to. Can I echo to what Mr. Kiru was saying? I think there's a two issue here, no? As he mentioned. In fact, that's what I said earlier. The campaign was there, but what's the setback on that? I think there's two things we need to know. One, as you saw, we do a lot of awareness and knowledge, no? But at the end of the day, there's no action. Why? The skill is not provided. We say don't throw rubbish, but how to manage the waste? Do we provide the skill? We say don't waste water. Do we provide the skill? Okay, so because study shows, like GC, we have developed this what we call civic science, where there's a 4-step creating awareness, which we already done this. I mean, when 30-40 years awareness campaign already started, so that's okay that we pass. Second is the knowledge. We need to give the knowledge, but the third one is the what is really lacking is the skill. Okay, with awareness, knowledge, and the skill, it will lead to the action that you and I want. Now we say people aware, but not action because of this thing. We didn't fulfill the puzzle. Is still there's a gap. So we need to provide the skill. That's number one. Number two, from us, our recommendation is, see the power of advertisement. I mean, everyone knows, okay, certain brand. I mean, the school, they've been, until now, they still do advertisement in TV. Why? Within 24 days, people don't see that, they will forget. That is the human's nature. So therefore, we have developed what we call river address. I think Encik Rashid have mentioned clearly, you know, that's what we are lobbying for the last 5 years in Malaysia, that every Malaysian should know their river address. What is a river address? Okay, we know our house address, so therefore we care. But unfortunately, nobody care to know their river address. There's a 3 component of the river address. Number one, what's the river that's flowing next to your backyard and so on. That's number one. Number two is what exactly Mr. Rashid have said, where your drinking water come from, which treatment plant and which river provide the raw water for the treatment plant. A lot of people, believe me, not only the layman, even professional, not knowing where their drinking water come from, which treatment plant and which river provide the raw water for that treatment plant. That's number two. And back to Encik Taufik, I'm not ignoring you as well. The third one is where your wastewater, the sewage water goes in. These are the 3 factors under the river address that GC lobby for last more than 5 years. Know your river that flowing in your area so that you know you are responsible for that river. Second, know where your drinking water come from which river. Sometimes you stay in the A river, but your drinking water come from the, like in PJ. You live in Klang River Basin, but your drinking water come from Selangor River. Okay. A third one, where your wastewater goes and play there. And lately, when we share this to the public, in fact, a lot of people get shocked to know how close they are to the river, how close they are into the middle of the cycle of the water cycle and so on. And recently, when I share this in my WP, Malaysian Water Partnership, where the chairman is the Director General of DID Malaysia, he thought this is a good idea. which GC was lobbying for last 5 years. You brought up this to the attention of the Dato Sri Kasa, KSU Kasa, and I've been informed that KSU already mentioned this to SPAN to look at, because we want this information to print it in a water bill, or if there's other bill printed, so that people, when they look into the bill, not only say Jumbaya, but also educate, remind them, okay, where their drinking water come from, and remind them about the importance of the river and so on. So
Betul kali. I think that one on that address, the river address, I think that SPAN is working on it, because I think for the IUK basically. So when we send the bill to, for example, this number 9 Jalan whatever, so we mention in the bill that their house is connected to which sewage treatment plant. Then the sewage treatment plant is discharged to which river actually. So this is will be mentioned in the bill lah. So we take note. I think SPAN already, I think going to impose on the water and sewage bill.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying, that it should be the way lah. So finally it's been that, but we don't know when SPAN will implement that. But these are the education I'm talking about, continuous education.
But I think we have to be, whatever input you want to put on the bills, because the bill is so small, you want to put so many inputs there, that nobody's going to read the things. Because as simple as this, we put the toll-free number, any advance, then they will call that number. Every month without fail, we put on the bill. Then these people still call the general number, they don't call the toll-free number. See, we put a campaign over there, they also not aware, they don't read it. You see? So to me, you go to the consumers and bring them to the place that we process the water, macam this you mentioned just now, then make these people aware. And they understand the source come from where, then how they get the treated water. So then another thing, I agree with what you call Dr. Kalu regarding this, the new generations. I think what the Japanese did is that you can see their new generations, they are very disciplined, they're very, what should I say, concerned about this alam sekitar or this kind of thing. But I experienced personally, I watched once rugby games in KL, so between the under 18, the Japanese team against, I think I forget which country. So the audience, what you call, watch the games. After the games, so many rubbish surrounding the stadium. The audience leave, but the Japanese players put up a plastic bag and collect all the rubbish, put inside the plastic bag, without asking by siapa-siapa pun, that automatically they do that. So the education to the new generation, to me, is also important, so that we can see, hoping that the next 5-10 years down the road, so that we can see the Malaysians, new generation, they are very responsible, especially towards, we discussed today about water.
Okay, I'd like to come back to this conversation, but before that, probably address some of the questions that we have received. So just to the participants, both in Zoom and Facebook, there are a couple of questions in relation to recycling the water, using it for industry, desalination and whatnot. But this is not really the series that we are going to have conversation in depth about that. Probably I will just allow, just give Encik Taufik and Encik Rashid to share some of the arrangement that I guess Malacca also have signed some MOU with Indah Water, right? So probably just a short explanation on that, but we are not going to go into detail, because today we're going to talk about consumer responsibility. The recycling bit we have covered in the previous segment, so please go check it out, our previous panel discussions.
Yeah, we already signed the MOU with IWK recently, so that we are exploring to have recycle plant to collect this wastewater from IWK, then we're going to treat the water and we're going to supply to the dedicated customer. Because we feel that, like I mentioned to you, Malacca is a water stressed state, and we feel that the recycled water is important, so that we can have additional water supply to the industrial players. Example, there's one customer we have, they are using 20 mld per day. So they only recycle about 10 to 12% only. The balance of the water they discharge to the sea. So we are studying with the IWK water, the storm water from the PBT, then we combine it, then we're going to reprocess it, then we come out certain standard of water, then we supply back to the industry. because everybody knows that the water that water operators processing now, the quality is drinking water. But like Melaka, what they call 50% of water that we produce, we are supplying to the industry. Actually, the use is not for drinking, it's for the productions. So actually, we don't have to produce quality up to the drinking standard, but that's the only standard that we have currently. So we have to share with the industries. So actually, we overdue. Actually, we don't have to process up to that standard, but we have no choice. So we are taking a step now. We are trying to do a recycle water. Then we try to supply. Hopefully, in the long run, we can split the system, recycle water for the industry, and also the fresh water, the treated water that we produce for the drinking purposes.
Actually,
okay, thank you. Yes,
actually, Puan Punita, actually, I think we have started with Ais Selangor basically, UK, because I think the target is for the industrial usage lah. Because of the Selangor also, Melaka also the stress state, water state. So hopefully that when we can supply to the industry, so then the water operator maybe they can have more supply to the domestic customer actually. So then this is also in line with the CASA Green Tech Master Plan actually. So by 2030 that we need to reuse 30% of our sewage effluent discharge or effluent water by effluent. And also I think the CASA strategic plan also by 2030, so we need there is a target of 1,500 MLD actually for the water to be reused. In fact, LBK now based on 7,000 number of plant, I think we can easily produce about 5,000 MLD actually. So this I think is a good initiative because of some of the large plant when the discharge effluent discharge is in terms of quality, I think is no doubt is crystal clear, but we just throw to the river actually. So then end up that we try to purify the river. Previously, river purify the waste. Now we try to purify the river. So the other way around now. So I think that's the issue lah.
Okay, thank you, Encik Taufik. So I suggest that the participants will actually raise a question in relation to recycling, circularity of water. Get in touch with Encik Rashid, Syarikat Air Melaka representatives or Indowater representative to get more information, and do check our previous panel discussion. I'll go to a question here. I mean, the person didn't give a name, anonymous attendee. Saya setuju dengan tanggungjawab pengguna memastikan tiada kebocoran dan menyediakan tangki air. Apakah nasihat apabila pengguna ini duduk di flat atau apartmen yang tidak mempunyai tangki? Tangki simpanan mungkin boleh tahan sehari, yang menyusahkan adalah lebih bila isu gangguan air lebih daripada 24 jam. Bolehkah pihak operator air atau pihak yang terlibat dapat kembalikan penyaliran air terawat dalam masa 24 jam? Pendapat saya perlu ada satu panduan untuk pihak yang terlibat untuk membaiki apa yang patut dalam masa 24 jam. Probably this one we can get Mr. Kiru to respond, because I believe SPAN has issued guidelines or KPIs to water operators about the disruption duration, how soon they have to ensure the service is recovered, right?
I think it's also very subjective because depending on the nature of disruption. If we talk about disruption because of pollution, I think it's also depending on external factors, right? So whether that subsides before we can resume supply to the public. When we talk about pipe bursts and all that, yeah, there is. I can't recall specifically what is the timeline prescribed to the operators. Yeah, there is a guideline which they have to comply with, and also it's tied up with the KPIs we post on them. So there is a specific timeline when it comes to scheduled disruption and also unscheduled disruption by pipe bursts and stuff of that nature. But when it comes to pollution, I think it's quite difficult to impose a timeline for them to resume supply as soon as what? Because this is because of the fact that we have to rely on external circumstances which has to be taken care of and tackled off first before we can allow for supply to resume. So that's why I say there's the two prongs to look at it in this sense.
So I would like to know then why there are situations where there is a minimum requirement, just now Encik Rashid shared, right? Minimum water storage. So why there are situations flats don't have water tanks? What happened that a flat do not have water tanks?
It is a requirement.
Okay, there's two situations here. If let's say pemaju buat high rise, then the system they do this thing is a gated and guarded development. So the system upfront they are not surrendering the system to the water operator. then they have to form the management committee and joint management body and to maintain it, you see. So normally during the approval for the developments, we impose the guidelines given by SPAN. They have to comply with certain standard of the storage, suction tanks and everything. But the joint management body, the management, of the building, they have to maintain it, clean up the thing, to make sure the storage are in good conditions and everything. Normally, through my experience, this thing was not done. The pump house was not maintained, then the central tank was not cleaned up properly, then there's don't have a preventive maintenance. Then just go back to the consumer, sometimes they don't pay the monthly subscription. So the joint management don't have sufficient collection, they don't have enough fund to do the maintenance, you see. If let's say the water supply from the operator, there's leakages outside, then definitely if the central tank was maintained properly, then they can sustain for a certain period. But if let's say internally the storage was down, no not functioning, so definitely if there are any leakages outside, then they got problems with the people in the flats. But that's why this thing at Malacca State, we did come out a proposal. The problem is that to come the landed properties, or this reservoir, the suction tanks, everything, they have individual title, then they hand over it to the water operator upfront, then we're going to maintain it. But for the high rise, because there's an issue due to strata titles. So this one is under strata titles, that they cannot issue strata titles to the water operators. So that we another issue. That's why we try to work out with the state government how we can come up so that especially those affordable houses and below, low cost and medium cost, to create a strata title and surrender the assets, the water assets to water operator, then we take over, then we maintain it from the beginnings, so that we can ease the problems of the consumers. See, because it's a burden to the people, because to own a property, one thing, then to pay the monthly subscription is another thing. You see, so it's really a burden in the long run. So once there's no proper maintenance, then gradually there'll be a problems in the long run.
Yeah, I think this is one key component where probably whoever listeners here today, participating in this program today, can share with your friends, family. It is important that you know what your developer, the person who developed your house are providing for you, because that has significant impact throughout the period that you're going to live in that property. So that means in terms of the storage tank they're providing, in terms of flats, when you're living in a flat. In fact, one of the questions the participant asked is why the commercial tariff is being charged. I think maybe this I can respond to this participant. If you're living in a service apartment, it comes under commercial, the land title is actually commercial land. So then the charges become commercial charges. So this is what information that normally developers do not share. So these are information that important for you to know, because now you end up paying commercial rate when you're living in a domestic property. So it's really like depending on state. If I'm not mistaken, Selangor is actually charging commercial tariff for service apartments. I do not know. What about Melaka and Encik Rashid?
Okay, for Melaka, if gated and guarded, the systems is not upfront surrendering to the water operators, then definitely we are leaving to the developers appointing the MC, then they have to read all the accounts inside the flats, you see. But we are not responsible. We just read the master misters outside. So if let's say they have common facilities like swimming pool, clubhouse, and other facilities, everything, then the MC back to back with this all the individuals. You see. So like I mentioned to you just now, is what our practice now. We try to reduce all these issues, because it's not fair to the consumer. If let's say the flat, there's no common facilities like clubhouse, swimming pool, nothing, just as residents only. Normally what we do is that we we charge to the individual residents at a domestic rate.
So in the case where it is, I mean, for sewerage, I think across the board, as long as a domestic property, residential property, it is domestic tariff. But when come to water, like what Encik Rashid has explained, if it's a domestic, the title of the land is actually domestic, domestic tariff. The title of the land is commercial, then you'll be charged commercial. So it's important for all of us as consumers to know our right, because it starts even before water services or sewage services come into that particular premises. There's another question here from Encik Muhammad Shahani. All contractors involved in plumbing are regulated as such. They are to comply to the standards set by the regulator. How stringent is the oversight process over the service providers in the supply chain? My experience during the first MCO, the house tank leaked and engaged a plumber to change, but I do not know the capacity of the tank replaced. Is it as per standard or not? I think what this particular question is relying is, they are depending on SPAN regulated plumbers and permit holders to follow the law, because they may not have the information of what is right, what is wrong, what are the specifications they need to put in place. So when relying on these permit holders who is regulated by SPAN, and if they don't do what they're supposed to do, how that can be addressed?
Okay, for Malacca case, we have a system. They can apply water supply through online. Then we have a panel plumbers. Then we engage the panel plumbers then to provide the service to the consumers once the application approved. So especially in PKP, people don't have to go to the SMB actually to queue up and to get the water supply. So then through the online, we process, approve it, then how much will be the fees according to SPAN's guidelines. Then we have our panel plumbers to do the job for them and get the water supply.
Okay, so the panel plumbers will also go and check the leakages in the
Whatever
house and the
requirements
storage tank.
Yes.
Okay, so what about other states, Mr. Kiru? Malacca seems to be doing perfectly well. What about, I know in my state, Selangor, I can't even change my water bill name because I need to be physically present in the office, Selangor's office. What is happening here, if you can share?
Well, I'm not sure about the operational part of the operators, but I think when it comes to permit holders, they are subjected to conditions attached in the permit itself. So, I mean, they are given a permit with conditions which they have to fulfill. So, if let's say there are any grouses on any permit holders who are not fulfilling, it can come from the operator and also from the common public. If let's say they are not happy with the services of the permit holder and what is the basis of their complaint, based on that, of course, they will be investigated, and if they are found to be in the wrong, there are certain methods of punishment taken against them. That could be, for example, suspension of the permit holder, or it can be a revocation of the permit holder from carrying out water-related activities. But I'm really not well equipped to comment on the part where what operators' role is in terms of assigning contractors who are our permit holders when it comes to certain portion of the work which they are giving it out. But when it comes to our perspective, this is what we do. If there is a complaint, it can, as I said, it can come from the service provider or it can come also from the common public. So the moment there is a breach of any of the conditions, it has to tie up to the permit rules we have. So if there is a breach of that particular rules and that particular condition, the necessary action will be taken against the permit holder. So we'll be, of course, notified to the public in terms of what action has been taken against them. Yeah, so that is the approach we do now.
Okay, so I think I'm sorry for all the questions that we can't respond, especially if it's not in relation to consumer responsibility, but I do hope if the panelists have the time, you or your representative can actually respond to the comments that has been put up in Facebook, because a lot of it is quite out of the conversations that we are having today. Okay, we have another 5 minutes. So I would like to pose this question to all the 4 panelists. I do know there's very strong sentiments because a lot of time and effort has been spent to educate, to create awareness, appropriate campaigns or whatnot. But has it occurred that there's a possibility that the way like Encik Rashid have talked about, fantastic, different type of campaigns are being done, but are we stuck in the same routine, doing same kind of conversation that has happened 20 years ago and hoping it will work today? Or do you think it's time to change, to make it more creative, like what Syarikat Malacca is doing, something different, something more like attractive? Because I think people are getting more visual nowadays, not audited, not based on just listening. And I don't think most of generation now are millennial and X and Ys are not really the type going to follow because it's being told to. If you tell me jimat air, I'm not going to do it. Because what does it mean? How am I going to jimat air? Because I'm used to using X amount of consumption. Are you going to say I'm wasting it? So I guess that is it time for us to look at the programs and education a bit more hands-on, like what just now Indawata was sharing, Syarikat Melaka sharing, to make it more vibrant, more realistic. That's one part of it. Another thing is, when we want to hold consumer accountable, that also means there must be transparency in sharing information and how the decision-making process are being done when certain guidelines, rules, regulations are being put forth. So what are the trade-off here? Are these things being done right now? Or is it sufficient? Because there seems to be a gap between what people know and what a regulator or service provider are expecting public to do and what public are doing. So are there sufficient transparency in sharing this information as well? What is happening, what's not happening, what is successful and what is not? To all the 4 panelists.
Okay, yeah, when it comes to campaign and exposure, I think we can be more graphic, I suppose, which is easier to digest. And there should also be a physical exposure, maybe like visiting to like what J. Rashid and J. Taufik has highlighted just now, to bring them to where the action is actually, you know. So of course, it takes a lot of effort to do this. So maybe you should start slowly. I mean, you can start in certain localities. And as they say, your neighboring river, they should know that there is a form of one source of water which is being used for their supply. I mean, you can start small from that scale. So I think that is something which we should look at. Just by posters, banners, and words, and all those sweet nothings, probably not working out. So there must be probably more graphic and more, I think we should educate them also on the implications and consequences, which we don't do now actually. What if you don't do this, what happens? This could happen, you know? So this is something I think we should look for. I suppose that is how you should explore and probably expand the campaign and awareness campaign we are doing now. And the other thing which you highlighted was,
the transparency, the engagement with the community, right? Because if you want me, let's say I'm looking from an outside perspective, right? You want me to be accountable for X, Y, Z, and how much information are you making it available for me and how transparent it is?
Yeah, I think when you highlighted that the fact that when we come up with regulations and rules and guidelines and whatever not, do we do it in silo or do we do it in consultation? But most of the regulations we come out with, we do in consultation with different groups of people. I mean, which includes the consumer representatives and and public representatives. So to say that we don't engage or we don't consult, I think it's not right. We do that. Maybe not so extensive, I suppose. Probably there are certain things are done in silo, and probably it should start that where we should just do everything in consultation with the rest. So this is where, as I said, when you highlight these are the new regulations which is going to come into place, what if you don't follow, what are the implications and what are the consequences? So you are putting a burden on them, and you are also putting up an accountability process on the members of the public to say that, oh, this is going to come into force. If I don't do this, I'm going to be accountable for it. So that thought will make them be aware of whatever they're going to do or whatever action they're going to carry out. They're going to think twice before they do it. So they will do it right. So I think that is something which we should all look for and do, I suppose.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kiru. Anyone?
I think Puan Punita, I think the transparency mentioned by you and also Mr. Kiru, and also I think the two-way communication also very important. So that's why I think so far based on I think over the years we can see that the awareness program is quite effective. So I just maybe I can just quote one case. Last few years there is a lot of incident of the illegal dumping to our sewer pipe actually. So then what happened is now after the lot of the awareness program, we can see that a lot of public now they come forward actually. So sometimes they call us saying that when they look any suspicious activities, so they will call us saying that okay, so this is happened in my area, and some extent they're willing to share the CCTV footage at the house also. So because I say to means to work closely with us lah. So that's why I think in general, I think we can see that a lot of program means that we can see that this is quite a can see the result lah. Good result means that now the customer, they become more responsible, so they know what they do lah. So but of course this need to be done continuously lah. So I think that's my point lah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I would like to add on this regards to water. Water cannot be replaced. So if we create a damage to recover, to rehab back the thing, takes some time. Then will cause lots of chaos to the public. You see. So I think, like Dr. Kali mentioned just now, polluter. I think we should review back our act. Then we should penalize them more serious amounts or whatever, so that these people will be more alert. So don't simply throw something to our rivers. You see. So now I think what few occasions happen, especially like in Selangor, then keep repeating the same thing happen. Like Melaka also, one of the river, we do the diversion. So recently happened again, people throwing something, then the water becomes smelly, then we have to do the flushing here and there. So because I think the hukuman tak cukup kuat, so these people never learn their lessons. So this is an importance, because water cannot replace this. Okay.
Yes, you're right. Thank you, Rashid. Dr. Kali, the last one.
Okay, I think as a way forward, obviously everyone mentioned, I think I totally agree. We need a very holistic and cross-sectoral approach to educate them, learn how to balance the top-down and bottom-up approach. Okay, but I'd like to put forward two other things. One, we need to slowly move to and treat river as a what they call national security issue.
Yeah.
Okay, we have to put that. Until then, no matter what we do, things, people will find a way to overcome it. I think we have seen the power of when we put security, national security, like in the COVID. I mean, whether even corporate don't like, also they follow. They lost millions of money because they couldn't do the operations on, but they do. So I think it's a time for our country and our politicians to start to think river as a national security. And second one, we need to treat community or consumer or public as a driver for the whole movement, whatever we are saying, regardless who's doing, is it a government or private sectors or regulator, all this thing. So we need to design the program in such a way that in the community be seen as a main driver for the whole transformation. Currently, for information, EPU also now drafting the National Water Transformation Sector 2040 for the next 3 Malaysian plan, all this thing. So they are putting on that. And finally, please emphasize, I think, as what I think both service providers mentioned, the skill, because I know when they go to see the treatment plant or both water treatment plant and sewage treatment plant, they can learn even better. The knowledge will be imparted even stronger because they can see is believing. Okay, so I still think the civic science is important, but when they say skill, it's better to go and see the hands-on things so that you'll even convince them and let the nature do the work to convincing of the public to be a right, responsible consumer for the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kali. So with that, we come to end of our program. To all the participants in Zoom who have put some questions up and we are unable to answer, I would appreciate if you can post those same comments on Forum IE Malaysia's Facebook page on that video. So we will definitely respond to that. And we do probably will get in touch with Syarikat Melaka Rep or Indawater Rep as well as PEN, Dr. Kali. If some of the responses, we would need your support to help. And I also would like to take these opportunities to ask those are listening today, please share this conversation with your family and friends. Let us know what will help you to be a responsible consumer, because this information will greatly help NGOs, regulators, and water and sewerage service providers. So they need to know what will help you so they can do and put necessary actions to help you do that. So please share with that. And one component of being a responsible consumer is being the eyes, ears, and the mouth for these operators. If you see something wrong, the system getting damaged, something being disposed illegally into the river, into the system, sewage or water system, please call the number up, report to them, take photos, whatever, because that is a huge help as well. Because it's not easy to take someone to court and prosecute if you don't really catch them in action. So it will be a great help if you have all those evidence and you can provide that to the regulator as well as the operators. So with that, this is our last conversation of 9 panel discussions. I truly appreciate those who have been with us from the beginning. And my deepest gratitude to all the 4 panelists who have stayed past 10 o'clock. Thank you very much, truly appreciate it. And with that, we come to an end to the program, Let's Talk Water. Thank you very much, everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you,
Yeah,
everyone.
good night.
Okay, okay.
Okay.
Night.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. See you all. Night.